You're left with all of the closing off.
Hello, welcome to the video. My name is Mark, and today we're going to be talking about the age-old question, can money buy you happiness? Now, obviously, if you are watching this video, you're an investor of some nature, either interested in being an investor or you currently are. And there's probably two main reasons that you want to invest. One is because you want to become filthy rich. And I'm guessing if you're a younger investor, that's probably an objective. You just want to make a ton of money. You want to live a lavish lifestyle. And one day maybe retire, or probably retire earlier than you would otherwise be able to do so if you didn't invest your money. Or perhaps you are an older investor and you've already invested over the years and you are comfortable. Your goal is to be comfortable in retirement, just to not have all the worries and the stresses of day-to-day life. That's a good objective too. In my career, I worked with many people. I worked with people with no money, very little money when I started in the business. In fact, when I started, I had very little money. I've also worked with people with a ton of money. I've worked with people with millions of dollars. Where are you on this spectrum? Are you younger and not yet rich? Or are you older and rich? Or are you older and maybe not rich yet, but wondering at what point would I have enough money to make me happy? We're going to cover that off today in sort of we're going to look at a few studies that actually measure happiness. But before we do that, I'm going to say, I'd like to know before you watch the evidence what your thoughts are. Can money make you happy? I'm going to ask you to pause the video just for a second and leave a comment. Just a simple yes or no would be great, or maybe leave a comment yes because, or no because, or I'm not sure. But before you look at all the evidence, where are you at today? And then we're going to compare that to after we've looked at the studies. So hit the pause button for a quick second and we'll be right back. So let's start with two fundamental questions. Does money make you happy? And if so, how much money do you need to be happy? So we're going to start with a definition of what rich is. So the Cambridge, and we're going to talk here only rich as far as money is concerned. There's all kinds of other ways you can be rich as well, but we're talking specifically from a financial perspective right now. The Cambridge Dictionary defines rich as having a lot of money or valuable possessions. We're taught at a young age, we're taught that the fairy tale stories, the rich equals the happiness, and there's princes and princesses, and everybody lives these glamorous lives with bags of money lying around and really not a care in the world. And you would think, well, that they must be happy. And that kind of makes some sense. My definition of rich from a financial perspective isn't necessarily having a ton of money, but it's having enough money that you can live day to day, week to week, month to month, without having to worry about the basic necessities in life, and have enough of a buffer there that you're not worried that that's all just going to go poof and disappear. So to answer the question, can money buy happiness? Now, I would argue that money by itself, it can't. It won't make you happy. And I'm going to give you a few examples to sort of illustrate that point. Let's start with pro athletes. Now, pro athletes, as we know, generally make a ton of money. They are wealthy. They make millions or tens of millions of dollars. They sign contracts where they're making 20, 30, or I think there's even somewhere they're making $40 million a year. So you would expect that having that much money would bring you happiness. Well, the National Bureau of Economic Research has studied this, and they say that 78% of NFL players and 60% of NBA basketball players actually experience financial difficulty after they've retired. About 16% of these athletes actually declare bankruptcy once they're no longer in the business. And that just, it blows my mind that someone with that much money could experience financial difficulties or certainly declare bankruptcy. Now, I'm guessing that if you're going to bankruptcy or if you're experiencing financial difficulties, you're not happy. So in that example, I would say, no, I don't think money does buy you happiness. Now, another cohort of people would be lottery winners. Again, same concept. You win a big chunk of money and your world has changed forever, and that surely will bring you happiness. Well, I would say a sudden influx of money can bring you stuff. It can bring you some excitement. It can bring you some adventures, but probably not happiness. According to Forbes magazine, about 44% of large lottery winners go broke within 5 years, and about a third of this cohort actually declares bankruptcy. Again, going bankrupt, I'm assuming does not make you happy. let's look at one more group called celebrities. Now, rich people are admired. We look up to them, we idolize them, and they have the boats, the cars, the women, the men, whatever you want, essentially, that you think would make you happy, you're going to have that. Now, I would say rich people also have their fair share of problems. I mean, there's divorces, there's health issues that, money can't make you help. There's drug addiction. There's a lot of stress that comes along with being a celebrity. And we think of the royal family. I'm sure the royal family is quite wealthy, and yet look at all the problems and the stress that they go through. Certainly, they would not be happy. I read an article recently that said that Kim Kardashian and Kanye West were actually locking horns. Now, I'm thinking, gee, if you're to the point in your marriage where you're locking horns, all the money in the world won't make you happy. Let's spend a few minutes and look at some principles, or what I would call money principles. I want to start by saying money itself will never be enough. Once you reach a certain level of money, very few people are happy with that level. Now, if you're starting off, I don't get me wrong, I believe in having targets. But if you're starting off as an investor and you say, my target is to save or to invest and grow to $10,000, well, that's a great target to have. If you're at 10,000, maybe set your target for 25 or whatever the case may be. If you're looking years down the road and you say, I need to retire, I need $50,000 worth of income in retirement in order to generate that, the nest egg I have to come up with, my target is X. Let's say it's $1 million or $2 million. That's a good thing. However, when people get to a target, it generally is never enough. If your target is 10,000, well, yeah, you want to get to 15 or 20. But even if your target is $2 million, you think that would be enough for most people to live on in retirement. Trust me, when you get to 2 million, you want that to go up to 2.5 million. If you get to 5 million, you want that to continue to go up. Very few people are happy having reached that target and just leaving it at that. I would say money is a tool, but not a destination. The money gives you all kinds of privileges, if you will. It gives you the ability to not worry about things like, where the next meal's coming from. You can have more possessions, but it's a tool, not a destination. You have to always, I would say, keep focused on the purpose that money will serve, not money in and of itself. I would also say that money comes and goes. You can't let money define you. If you do, well, you're going to live by that definition. So I guess if you have a lot of money, you're going to feel, well, I'm happy. But that money can go. And we've heard of lots of cases, even people who don't mismanage money. It could be a health crisis, or it could be, any number of things where your fortune, if you will, can disappear. And if you're relying on that to define who you are, well, you're in for a pretty hard fall when things turn south on that regard. So always keep in mind that money can't define you. It has to be a means to an end. Money at the end of the day can't change how you feel about yourself. Temporarily, sure. And I've seen this. I've worked with wealthy people who have gotten a little ahead of themselves and felt that this money made them special. But at the end of the day, you're no more special than anybody else. You just have more resources, so it gives you more opportunities, but it doesn't define who you are. And you always have to live within that reality of you as a person. Keeping up with the Joneses is something that we've always, it's always been around, and I guess it always will be. I'm hoping that maybe you can take something out of this video and enjoy and appreciate the money, but don't always compare yourself, because there's always going to be someone who's richer. There's only one person in the world at any given time who's the richest person, and that even fluctuates depending on what the markets are doing in that particular day. So look at your needs and don't compare yourself to what a bunch of other people have. Let's measure wealth. Now, there's two different main measurements that we can look at when we're looking at, am I wealthy? First of all, we can look at income, and then we can look at assets or net worth. Now, income is temporary in nature. Income is something that you earn on an ongoing basis if you have a job, or it can be passive income that you earn from having accumulated enough net worth. So let's look first at income and see how much income do we need to be happy. Well, in a 2010 study by the Department of Psychological Sciences at Purdue University, a study that was based on a 1.7 million population, so 1.7 million people were studied across 164 countries. The average was determined to be about $77,500. If you have income as an individual of $77,500 in, let's call it your local currency, you tend to be happy. Now, $95,000 was the ideal income level to create happiness, And $60,000 to $75,000 was a category that they said would be, what they called emotional well-being. Once you're accumulating that much money, you're not worrying about the necessities of life. Now, most people would be happy to earn some more money, but you're in a state where you're not panicking and you don't have to worry, as I said earlier, sort of about the mundane things of life, like eating and shelter and all those types of things. Any increases after that tend to become associated with a reduced life satisfaction and actually a lower level of well-being. And this is a bit odd because you'd think the more money you make, the more you would be satisfied. But the studies show that that's not necessarily the case. And a quote from the study says, "This may be because money is important for meeting basic needs, purchasing conveniences, and maybe even loan repayments, but to a point. So after the optimal point of needs is met, people may be driven by such desires such as pursuing more material gains or engaging in social comparisons, which could ironically lower well-being." More money doesn't mean you're going to have a greater degree of happiness. At least when we look at the topic of income, there seems to be a diminishing returns, and in fact, as we've seen, can even make you unhappy. One of the big things that I've experienced is comparing yourself to others. Just focus on your own situation. Be content, be grateful, I would say, for the income that you're earning, regardless of what that is, and don't always be looking to compete with the guy down the street. There is a flip side to that too, and some people compare themselves to lower earning people or to poorer people, and I would argue that be grateful that you're earning a higher income, but that doesn't really make you a better person or compared to someone who's earning a little bit less. So let's look now at assets. So look at net worth. So how much is enough? There comes a point, like in interest or like in income, there comes a point of diminishing returns. Now, a study that I found very interesting was done by the Spectrum Group in 2019. And it says that money can make you feel happier, yes, but again, to a point. This study looked at 700 wealthy investors, and they set out a happiness scale of 0 to 100. So in the $100,000 to $500,000 of net worth range, 63.8%, or sorry, the average score that was given was about 63.8 on the happiness scale. So let's assume 50 is sort of moderately happy, more than moderately happy, but in the 64% range. Now, if we jump up to a band in the $10 million to $15 million range, at that point, about 77% of the people said that they were healthy. So there's I would say, a significant jump when you go from $500,000 up to the $10 to $15 million range. Now, interestingly, when you jumped up to the $15 to $25 million range, about 72% said that they were happy. So you could actually say here that having too much money negatively impacted happiness. One of the major things that people looked at was the relationship that they had with their children, and this is obviously critical. There's a lot of viewers of this channel who are the next generation, so we're talking about your parents here. But there's there is a challenge. There's a dilemma that adults who have accumulated wealth have, and I've experienced this directly as an advisor over my career. And there's this what would I call it, a dilemma, I suppose, or this choice that people have to make. Most people who have accumulated wealth they have a genuine interest in passing that wealth down to their survivors, to their heirs. However, there is there's a imbalance in the two objectives of, one, making sure I have enough money now to live the rest of my days in the lifestyle I like, and passing it down. And I've had occasion where I've had to essentially counsel clients who have been on that bubble. They're not extremely wealthy where they will not have no worries about ever spending their money, just enough that they are in the comfort zone, but their desire to help out their children today would actually jeopardize that scenario. So it kind of adds stress as a wealthy individual when you're looking at this decision between, do you pass money down today or do you wait until it's time for an inheritance? Now, I'm going to look at another side of the argument of this debate. I'm going to look at a Harvard Business School study that was done in 2018 by researchers Grant Donnelly and Michael Norton. Now, they studied 4,000 millionaires, and they had a more modest scale. Instead of 1 to 100 like the previous study, they had a scale of 1 to 10. So how happy are you based on number 1 to 10. And they asked the question, in general, how much more money would you need to go from where you are today up to a 10? And the answers were basically, most people said they needed 2 to 3 times as much wealth that they had. So in other words, if you had $1 million today, they felt they needed $2 or $3 million to be happy, to go up to a 10 in happiness. If they had 5 million, they felt that they needed to go up to 10 or 15 million to be happy. Now, those numbers don't match up. A millionaire needs to go to 2 or 3, but a 5 needs to go to 10 or 15. So that tells you something about human nature, and it tells you that we are rarely satisfied. Going back to kind of what I said earlier, there's this number that when you get to a certain target, you always want more. I think this is a really good example of how that comes into play in a case like this. I would argue that at a certain point, once you have sufficient money to provide for your retirement, another million doesn't make anything more affordable. You can't go and buy a whole bunch of new cars. Well, you could, but you're not going to get any benefit from that. So, the next notch up is not going to change your lifestyle in a positive way. This study had a bit of a contrast to the previous one, and this said that when you get to $10 million, you actually have a moderately higher happiness level than those with 1 million to 2 million. So the previous study said that there's a diminishing return once you get to a certain point. In fact, this study, it says the opposite. It says that you do feel a little bit happier, but I would say moderate. There's a modest increase. It's not going to make you, if you go from 10 million to 11 million, it's not going to make you a whole bunch happier, but it will modestly affect that. So let's ask the question here: why would rich not equal happiness? I mean, this is kind of back to where we started. What do the rich people worry about? And I've had firsthand experience of working with people who are wealthy, and I've seen the worries and the concerns. Another study by the Spectrum Group studied affluent people, and I believe I don't remember what the metrics were, but millionaires, and 20% of the ultra high net worth investors, so this is in the $5 to $25 million range, are concerned about running out of money. Now, I know that's pretty hard to imagine that if you have $25 million, you'd actually be concerned about running out of money. And 20% of this group does share that concern. What are the concerns? Well, number one is healthcare. Now, clearly, if you have accumulated this much money, you're probably going to be older, unless you won the lottery, which we know then there's a good chance you're going to go bankrupt. So let's assume that you've done the right things over years. You've collected a whole bunch of money, or you've saved up a whole bunch of money. Healthcare becomes an issue as you get older. And that is a concern that a lot of people share when they think about running out of money. Another challenge that you have today, in today's environment when you've accumulated a lot of money, is the low interest rates that we are living in today and maintaining the lifestyle. So once you've gotten used to a certain lifestyle, it's really hard to step back, regardless of what level you're at today. Every time you take a step forward, you don't really want to come back down. And the wealthy people have generally more costly lifestyles. And I think back to when I started in the business, just as a quick example, interest rates were roughly, let's say, in the 10% or even a little bit higher, but let's use 10% as an example. If you retired at that point with $500,000 in investments, that would buy you $50,000 a year worth of income. So you could kind of comfortably count on that, and you could set your lifestyle to that. Well, what happened during my career, and we're seeing it today with interest rates being so much lower, is today that same $500,000 would buy you around $5,000 to $10,000 in income. So you can see, if you have lived and you've gotten used to having a $50,000 a year income in retirement, and all of a sudden you're now in the $5,000 to $10,000 worth of income, you really can see how that affects your lifestyle and probably your degree of happiness there as well. Another issue to think of is the high net worth tend to spend more. It's sort of the same equation as normal people, but with just larger numbers. The costs that high net worth people tend to have, and it's not uncommon that you would have more than one residence. That's quite common. Often you'd have, say, a cottage, that type of thing. Travel is something that you probably tend to do more if you have the ability to do it. Even things like upkeep on those properties that you have is going to cost you a lot of money. You're going to have perhaps gardeners, you're going to have a pool boy. There's a lot of things that, again, you become accustomed to that make you happy, or at least they seem to make you happy. So worrying, this goes back to sort of the 20% of people worry about losing money. I'm not sure they worry about losing all their money, but they worry about losing enough money that they can't maintain their current lifestyle. Lastly, I'm going to talk about heirs. I did touch on this earlier, and wealthy people have mixed objectives. They want to preserve their wealth, to be sure, to have enough, that they need to live on, but they also want to pass along some income or some wealth, some assets to their children in many cases. So there's this, how much can I pass along without jeopardizing, the rest of my life? Let's say you're 60 years old even. You have, statistically 20 to 30 years ahead of you. So we're going to touch on a moment on how sharing money actually makes you happy, can give you happiness, but you have to make sure that you don't share so much that you're going to, the coin's going to flip over and now you're not going to be able to maintain your own level of comfort. A few other factors that affect happiness are this. How you get rich has an impact on your happiness. Generally speaking, virtually all of the studies show that earning your own wealth gives you more satisfaction, more happiness than by inheriting the money. Inheritances are great, but they're not going to make you happy statistically. Things like investing. You're doing the right thing now. You're learning how to invest, or perhaps you're honing your investment skills. Though that type of wealth creation, you'll have some satisfaction in having done that. You start a business, let's say, and you make some money off business, or maybe just saving a share of your earnings, your profits, your wages, your bonuses. These things all will be in the factors on what makes you happy. Those will be more. They'll have a higher perspective for you than just simply going out and being given a whole bunch of money. Lastly, I'm going to touch on giving your money away. This might sound a little bit counterintuitive, but there is a ton of evidence that suggests that if you can afford it, you're not struggling on a day-to-day basis, giving money away will actually provide you with some satisfaction. Let's talk for a moment about Andrew Carnegie, or Carnegie, depending on how you pronounce his name. But he's a Scottish-American businessman, and he made his money in the steel industry. This goes back a lot of years. He donated 90% of his money to charities, and he believes that, and he believed at the time, giving to others leads to greater happiness than spending money on one's self. And there's a lot of empirical evidence that suggests that in fact is the case. We probably are familiar, and if not, I'll familiarize you now with what's called the Giving Pledge. Now, this is a group that was started back in 2010 by Bill Gates and Warren Buffett and 40 others at the outset of that. Today, the Giving Pledge has been taken by about 220 pledgers from 25 countries, and they range in age from 30s all the way up into their 90s as it is today. Some of the names that as an investor you're probably familiar with is Ray Dalio and his wife Barbara. They have joined the Giving Pledge, and they've said, we learned that beyond having enough money to help secure the basics, which are quality relationships, health, stimulating ideas, etc., having more money, well, nice, wasn't all that important. So we found taking our excesses and providing them to others who have extreme shortages has been both good an investment for us as well as great satisfaction. Now, Bill Ackman, another name that you're probably familiar with, he says, my earliest memories include my father's exhortations about how important it is to give back. These early teachings were ingrained in me, and a portion of the first dollars I earned, I gave away. Over the years, the emotional and psychological returns I have earned from charitable giving has been enormous. The more I do for others, the happier I am. Can money buy happiness? Maybe not directly, but maybe having those assets and having that money that you can share with others can buy you some happiness. And according to Bill Ackman, that is in fact the case. The last example we're going to look at is Richard Branson, a name you're probably familiar with, and his wife Joan. As he wrote, stuff really is not what brings happiness. Family, friends, good health, and the satisfaction that comes from making a positive difference are what really matters. We started by trying to give a voice to young people in the 1960s and hope our Giving Pledge will help many generations to come. These are perfect examples of people who have created tremendous wealth and are happy to give it back, and so the money is turning into happiness. Now, a caveat, it's, if you have $10 billion and you give, say, $9 billion away, you're still left with $1 billion. None of these people are going to end up struggling to meet their day-to-day needs, but it is an example on our own scales how much helping others and helping share that wealth can actually provide happiness. So I'm going to summarize some of the pros and the cons. I would say clearly from what we just saw, purpose beats just being rich. The pros of being rich are that you don't have to worry so much about the basics in life. You can do things that other people can't do. From a portfolio management perspective, and I think this is really important for investors, is that having created wealth gives you the option in retirement of having a moderate or a balanced portfolio. You don't have to worry about creating a whole bunch of wealth at that point, and so you don't have to necessarily take on additional risk, and that basically results in a reduced stress level. Less wealth, I would say, leads to the tendency to take on more risk at exactly the time that you probably shouldn't be. Now, there are some cons, as we've learned. One thing I didn't really speak of earlier specifically but clearly the losses that you could suffer as a wealthy investor numerically are bigger than the losses you would suffer as a younger investor. So imagine you had, say, $10,000 invested and you had a 20% drop in the value of your net worth. Well, that's a $2,000 drop, and yeah, that sucks. But it is probably tolerable for a lot of people, especially as you're continuing to build wealth. Now, if you've managed to accumulate $1 million in wealth in investable assets, let's say, and you have a 20% loss, well, that same 20% is now going to be obviously $200,000. Or if you have a $10 million portfolio, the same 20% is going to be $2 million. And yes, the percentage is the same, and that's kind of the language we speak in the business. But a $2 million loss, just psychologically, even if you have a lot more, is generally harder to accept than a $2,000 loss. So that's another issue that you have to deal with as a wealthier investor. There's quite a bit of evidence, there's quite a bit of studies as to what actually, can money buy happiness. So when we started the video, I asked you to pause and answer yes or no. So after having listened to these studies, I'm curious, has anything that you've heard changed your opinion? Is it, has what you've heard solidified your opinion? If you want to go back and amend that comment, I find that very interesting to see how the evidence, the sort of the pros and the cons and the for and against the argument have affected your opinion on this. Quick question, in the comments below, the videos that I contribute to this channel have tended in the last month or so since I started to be quite technical in nature, lots of charts and graphs and that type of thing. This has been more of a philosophical discussion or more sort of high level. So my question is, which do you prefer? I can do both. I know Brandon from occasionally does things like this where he just kind of talks off the top of his head. If this is the type of thing you'd like to hear more from me, let me know. I'm happy to do this. Or if you want to sort of use my resources more of a technical nature, let me know. I do read the comments. I wish I had time to reply to all of them, but I don't. But I do read them, and as I'm learning how to work in this new arena, I take your comments very seriously, and I'm going to try as much as I can to add those. As always, we have a link below here, which is for a link to our investment academy, and we are excited about a new service that we're going to be putting out starting in the middle of April. So in another week or so, we're going to be having our private member group. And so if you click on the link below, it'll take you to that page and provide you with some information on that if that's something that you're interested in. Lastly, I will say this coming Saturday, we're going to have our second in the series of our dividend videos. So we're doing a 4-part series probably of dividend investing. Last Saturday, the topic was high yielding dividends. We're going to be focusing this coming Saturday on dividend growers. So if that's something that you're interested in following, I would encourage you, hit the subscribe button and maybe hit that, there's a little bell, and you can hit the bell button, and then you'll be notified on Saturday morning as soon as the video comes out. You can be one of the first to watch it, and look forward to having you and seeing if we can add some value to your investing experience there as well. So I'm going to wrap up this video. As always, I'm going to say thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate the support that you all give the channel, and I look forward to seeing you Saturday morning.